Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It is good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. President Biden is pledging to boost the supply of coronavirus vaccines going to states as many struggle to inoculate their residents.
But it's also no secret that we have recently discovered in the final days of the transition, and it wasn't until the final days we got the kind of cooperation we needed, that once we arrived, the vaccine program is in worse shape than we anticipated or expected. After a review of the current vaccine supply and manufacturing plans, I can announce that we will increase overall weekly vaccination distributions to states, tribes, and territories from 8.6 million doses to a minimum of 10 million doses. Starting next week, that's an increase of 1.4 million doses per week.
He also said the administration is working to address new COVID-19 variants and to expect the country's death toll will surpass 500,000 in the coming months. We will have more on that later this hour. But first, the Senate is preparing for the impeachment trial of former President Trump. While it's still nearly 2 weeks away, it's already clear that conviction will be an uphill battle. Members of the Senate were sworn in as impartial jurors for the trial this afternoon. It is set to begin the week of February 8th. The article of impeachment was delivered to the Senate last night by the House impeachment managers. Mr. Trump has been impeached on one charge of incitement of an insurrection. It came after months of false claims about a stolen election and his encouragement of protesters in Washington the day of the deadly riot at the Capitol. The acting U.S. Capitol Police Chief apologized to lawmakers Tuesday, saying the agency knew of the threat from militia groups and white supremacists 2 days before the attack, but failed to adequately prepare. It comes as the Washington Post reports the Pentagon limited the commander of the D.C. National Guard's authority ahead of the riot. Major General William Walker said his ability to quickly deploy troops was restricted and that he had to wait for approval before dispatching any to the Capitol, despite 40 soldiers ready on standby. That's where we begin with Weijia Jiang, Skyler Henry, and Zeke Miller. Weijia is a CBS News senior White House correspondent. Skyler Henry is reporting for CBS News on Capitol Hill, and Zeke is a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press. Welcome. It's good to have you all. So, Skyler, it is going to take every Democrat and at least 17 Republicans to convict former President Trump. And this afternoon, we got a preview of how that vote could play out. What did we learn?
Well, hey, Elaine, good evening to you. Well, it'll certainly be an uphill battle, as you said earlier, for Democrats looking to garner support from Senate Republicans. As you mentioned, 17 would be needed in order to convict President Trump. But what we saw today is a majority of Senate Republicans actually vote to throw out the impeachment trial before it even began. We saw a motion brought up by Senator Rand Paul earlier today saying that it was unconstitutional to have this trial for a former president, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer actually countered that, saying that while a former president hasn't faced an impeachment trial, a former government official has, and so it isn't as unprecedented as once thought here. But those 5 senators who voted alongside with Democrats earlier today, at least to move forward with this trial, Romney, Sass, Collins, Murkowski, and Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey, all said that they want to continue with this trial moving forward. But what we've heard all along, at least for the past few weeks or so, about this upcoming trial, a few things from Republicans. Some saying that they want to simply move forward. President Joe Biden is now in office and former President Trump is out of office. And to move forward with the country, we should actually not have this trial. The other part of this that we heard from the likes of Senator Mitt Romney, for example, he said that if what President Trump did on January 6th isn't an impeachable offense, then what is? And so now you have a bit of a fissure in the GOP as far as how they will move forward. Interesting to note, though, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell voted to throw this impeachment trial out. I know in the past few weeks we were waiting to see kind of how he would move and how he would choose to vote as things started to roll along in terms of an impeachment trial. There were rumors that he wanted to let the facts sort of play out before making a decision, but he voted alongside his Republican colleagues in saying that this trial should be thrown out before it even began. So that is an interesting interesting point. So now we have this break, right, where the Senate will reconvene on February 9th, the week of the impeachment trial. It gives both sides the opportunity to gain their legal strategies before they figure out how to move forward with this. We know that the president is still building his legal team, but it also gives House managers the opportunity to kind of lay out what they feel as though the president or the former president did wrong and why they feel as though he should be convicted, and then they'll have to have another vote to decide whether he should be banned from public service ever again.
So then, Weijia, with the potential for significant Republican opposition appearing to be building, where does President Biden stand on impeachment?
You know, President Biden has been really careful not to weigh in too heavily about whether he thinks President Trump should be convicted and offer his personal opinions, because his number one priority right now is to pass the American Rescue Package, his nearly $2 trillion stimulus relief plan for COVID relief. And he is the president now, even though he is the leader of the Democratic Party. And so certainly impeachment is a divisive issue, and he knows that. And so he hasn't really offered an explicit opinion, although he did apparently run into one of our colleagues at CNN in the halls of the West Wing. And he reportedly said that, you know, he thinks it does have to happen and that the effect would be worse if the trial did not move forward. And so to that extent, he does support the process. And he has even said that, you know, that senators should find a way to split up their workday so they can focus on the trial as well as his legislative agenda. And that's exactly what his press secretary said today when pressed about why Mr. Biden is not more clear about where he falls on this. And she said, you know, his priority is to complete, you know, his goals and immediately to get money to people who are suffering right now. And he has faith in the Senate that they will make the decision about, you know, what to do with this article of impeachment.
Well, meanwhile, Zeke, the stalemate over power sharing in the Senate seems to have broken. What led to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell dropping demands for filibuster protection, and how might that impact the Biden agenda?
Well, we saw Senate now Minority Leader Mitch McConnell drop that requirement or that demand of Democrats, in part because it became moot. There were two Democratic senators who said they weren't going to remove the remove the filibuster. That was enough to effectively give him the protections he was looking for the president at the White House. This is certainly a welcome development for them, that the Senate can actually get its organizing resolutions passed, get its committees formed, and allow the business of legislating and oversight and nominations and all the other things that the Senate has to do to get underway. That is, you know, sort of that had been held up for more than a week now, and now they can actually get about the business of legislating.
Well, Skyler, another of President Biden's early priorities, his executive order halting deportations for 100 days, was temporarily blocked by a federal judge for the next 2 weeks. Why, and what happens to people facing immediate removal from the U.S.?
Right. Well, the latter part of that isn't abundantly clear up until this point. But basically, this stems from a lawsuit down in Texas where there was essentially an agreement between the Department of Homeland Security and the state in the waning days of the Trump administration, essentially saying that if there were any sort of policy changes, that it would have to be agreed to by the state of Texas. And so in these sweeping policy reversals that we're starting to see from the Biden administration, trying to reverse some of the things that former President Trump had in place, this is one of them. And it should be noted that this federal judge who at least put this temporary halt on the Biden executive order is a Trump appointee. And so it remains to be seen exactly how we will move forward with that. We've already heard from the ACLU, who said that this ban, they simply do not agree with this ban. This will be tried in court on both sides to see how they will move forward. forward. And remember, this is at least for another 2 weeks. But in the Biden executive order, it also protects most immigrants or most folks who have come to the country before November 1st, not after. And so it remains to be seen kind of what happens there. But the other thing that you have to think about here is just how this will play out. It also goes to show just how limiting a president's executive orders actually are, executive actions actually are in an instance like this. We know that there are similar agreements between the Department of Homeland Security and other states in the waning days of the Trump administration. And so we wonder if this is just going to be the first of many, or if this is going to be some sort of an anomaly here where only the state of Texas is pushing back.
All right, Skyler Henry, I know you have to go. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Yep.
Well, Zeke, let's continue this conversation because I want to ask you about some news that you seem to spur on, the Biden administration's vaccine efforts. It started with your question to the president last week. Let's go ahead and listen to that exchange.
The goal at 100 million vaccines.
Thank you, guys.
Is that high enough? Shouldn't you set the bar higher? That's basically where the U.S. is right now.
When I announced it, you all said it's not possible. Come on, give me a break, man.
Come on, you guys.
That's a good start. 100 million.
Zeke, that was so fascinating to watch, and it's why we always sort of linger after these events, because when you shout these questions, sometimes you get an answer. So since this question, of course, we've seen the president raise this possibility of vaccinating even more people than his goal of 100 million shots, a comment his press secretary insisted was not a new official target. But Zeke, what can you tell us about all this leading up to what we learned from the president tonight?
Well, there's obviously been this, pent-up frustration at the state level, state and local leaders. We've heard this from them over the last several weeks now. Concerns that there has not been a sufficient supply of vaccine for them to carry out their vaccination plans, but also that supply has not been, not been predictable, and it's changed the last minute. This week, the story in a number of states has been that they've had to cancel vaccinations, initial first vaccinations. Different states across the country because the vaccine supply was not what they expected it to be. This for the president and his new administration is sort of the defining challenge in the opening days: is how can they get more shots into arms? The president, when he took office, came in just at the moment where the Trump administration's plans for getting vaccinations sort of really did seem to sort of hit a bit of stride. For the last week or so, the U.S. has been averaging more than a million vaccinations, individual shots in arms per day. That is consistent with President Biden's goal of 100 million shots in arms in the first 100 days. So that's why we were asking, now that sort of we're at that benchmark, what you've been saying you're going to have all these other plans. How much further can you push it? And I think we're just starting to get a sense of that right now, with the president yesterday saying he thinks that he can get that up to the pace of that vaccination up to 1.5 million shots in arms per day potentially. And that's with the existing supply of vaccines, with the promise potentially of an approval of the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine in the next few weeks. They're expected to file for that emergency approval potentially as soon as next week. We can start seeing that supply really ramp up. So, I think the White House was setting expectations a little low, to under-promising with the hopes of then over-delivering. And I think now they're starting to sort of begin to, because there's been some of this new promise, to really raise some of their goals.
Yeah, we'll continue to watch and see what exactly is delivered and what is then promised as we move through the weeks and months here. Well, Weijia, I want to ask you about a written statement from Donald Trump last night. It was headlined as coming from the office of the former president. Is this the most clear concession that we have seen from him so far?
Well, in the final few weeks of his term, he started to say things like, when the new administration is sworn in, but it's, the ship for the traditional concession has long sailed, and President Trump never got on it, because when you concede, you admit defeat, and he never did that in a traditional way, because to the very end, he insisted that he actually won the election, and he gave false reasons about why, and provided no evidence to support these conspiracy theories that we have all covered extensively. And so even on his last day, he talked about a new administration, he's never said President Biden. He's never said Vice President Kamala Harris. And what's interesting is in the prepared remarks that we got a copy of, he was supposed to do that during this ceremony at Joint Base Andrews before he took off for Florida. And that was going to be the closest that he got to admitting defeat, by saying by name, his successors. And again, he went totally off script and did not say that and did not wish them well, as we were anticipating. And so it's not necessarily surprising, but it is part of who President Trump is. And that's exactly why we're hearing from his office of the former president, because he doesn't really have a platform now to communicate. And he certainly has a lot to say. And so I expect to receive a lot more statements from this newly opened press shop for the now former president.
Well, it's such an astute observation that the concession ship has long since sailed, Weijia, as you put it. Never heard it quite put that way before, but that is exactly what many observers have been noting. All right, Weijia Jiang and Zeke Miller, by the way, two of the question shouters, the best question shouters in the business. Thank you so much. In case you haven't seen them in action, right?
Zeke is really trained, and President Biden should be prepared for a press corps that is probably different from when he was there under President Obama, because the past 4 years we have added new skills to our tool set, which include shouting questions after an event.
Oh, I can tell. Absolutely. Those skills are sharp. I can definitely see that. All right, Zeke and Weijia, so great to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.